kinge migagita. Igi lenje gasotet kinge migagita. Akame kimyet kishat kinge migagita. Akame kimyet kishat kinge migagita. Kongo igagita. Konyane kibata. Ichame gagita. Kongo ikonyane kibata. Itoni kitapchi.
Welcome, I am your host, Asar Imhotep, with the Madu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Culture and Science. Today, we have a special guest with us for our intimate talks with scholars from around the world. We have with us Dr. Kipkoeech Sambu, who is the author of numerous books on the Kalenjiin people of Eastern Africa. To name one is the Missouri Legend Explored, a linguistic inquiry into the Kalenjiin people's oral tradition of ancient Egyptian origin. And the Kalenjiin people's Egypt origin, Legend Revisited, was Isis. I'd like to welcome Dr. Kipkoeech Sambu. Thank you for joining us here today. And how are you doing this evening?
Fine, Asar Imhotep, pleased to meet you. It's been long since we wrote to each other, and we kept writing, but we never met. But we are now meeting face to face, thanks to this technology.
Yes. So just a little background. I came across your work actually through a radio interview, and you were speaking on Maat. And from there, I went and got a hold of your first book, The Kalenjiin People's Egypt Origin, and then after that, I went and got the second book. But for the people who do not know you, please give us a little bit of background of who you are, where you're from, who the Kalenjiin people are, and how you got into the study of a more systematic study of your own people, the Kalenjiin.
Thank you very much. My name is, as you have mentioned there, Kipkoeech Sambu. I come from Kenya, East Africa, and my immediate people are called the Kalenjiin, as you have mentioned there. They are part of East Africa. About 8 million of them are in Kenya. That's the biggest branch of them. We have others in Uganda, the Sabine area. We have others in Tanzania, yet others in Ethiopia, Western Ethiopia, and Southern Sudan. So I don't know how many millions there are, but it's a large group of people. These are the immediate Kalenjiin. And then there are other Nilotic peoples. They are an East African phenomenon. There are few. That's where I come from. I went to school in Kenya for the lower grades up to university, first degree. Did another degree via a London institution, the certified Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply. After that, I did my doctorate in South Africa when I changed my interest and went to Egyptology. So I studied Coptic in the Coptic Center in Nairobi, and then transferred on to the University of South Africa and completed my doctorate in South Africa, after which I went to Germany to do the postdoctoral practicals. And precisely that's what I have done formally in education. The rest of the time I've been reading. And my interest in this field came long after I was through with my first degree and the second diploma. In 1990, that's when I turned to Egyptology, when I went to a library and discovered just one word in Coptic. I read a Coptic book there, something just accidentally, and it said the Coptic word for the hand or the hand is tigig, but in Kalenjiin tigig is here. So I followed that up, and it was very interesting. From there on, more and more discoveries, and then I decided to study Coptic officially. I did that for 3 years at the Coptic Center, Nairobi, before transferring on to the University of Nairobi, of South Africa, to complete the doctorate.
So with that first word for hand, you basically, what you're saying is that you read a word from the Coptic language and it matched a word for hand in your language, and then this prompted you to study more deeply the ancient Egyptian language and culture, and you started to find, if I'm correct, you started to find more and more correspondences, and this is how your work developed.
Yes. I must tell you first, initially, that the Kalenjiin people have this history, and they must tell all kids must be brought up knowing that they originated from Misri, that is the ancient name for Egypt, or another name, To. So you came from To, they are told. So we are told all these. I was told that too. But this coincidence, when I read this thing by happenstance, this name, this word, Tigig, then I decided, why don't I check more on this and prove this tradition, oral tradition, whether it's true or not. I had seen this first time, a small proof though at that time, and then I decided to go deep into it.
Well, I have in my hand, as I mentioned earlier, after I heard you speaking on Maat, I hurried up and got this book, and I can say that it is, as a person who studies ancient Egypt in relationship to modern Africa, this has been one of the better books that I've read, because it ties to a living culture, and it is something that is it is rarely done, especially in the English-speaking world. In the French-speaking world, they do a lot of linguistic correspondences and things of that nature, but never a full-out comparison of the modern culture to the ancient. And so I really appreciated this work. But for the audience who does not know about this work, can you please tell them, what it's about, what is in it, and what inspired you to detail this work in such a way that you did?
The book you're holding up there is that's my first book. It compares ancient Egyptian religion with the Kalenjiin religion. I'm using a discipline called Comparative religion, where you compare religions. So I compare that religion with the Kalenjiin traditional religion, as well as other religions worldwide, and to see the similarities. The biggest similarity, of course, you can see is Isis, and compared to the Kalenjiin name for God, and the Kalenjiin God is goddess Isis. So to compare Isis of Egypt, who was also goddess, and the goddess of the Kalenjiin, who is the sole goddess Isis. Compare other names for God, like Ta. I think you have seen Ta. Probably you pronounce it Pita. It's Ta. It's a very difficult word to pronounce for someone who is not familiar with the Kalenjiin type of languages. They're called, I call them somewhere Hamitic, and I hope we'll explain why we call them Hamitic, Nilo-Hamitic. They have words beginning with a P and T, P and K. So this is Ta. I compare Ta with, or at least even use the word Ta, which is the name we gave to Jesus when missionaries came from America and Europe to try and evangelize amongst us, and they taught us this religion, which we thought was a foreign religion, that's Christianity. And they asked us, that is almost 2 centuries ago, so from the 1900s, 1 century, 14 years perhaps ago, they asked the Kalenjiin, okay, there's this savior. There's somebody who came as a savior and he has saved you. What is the best name we can give to this savior? So the Kalenjiin offered Ptah. They call him, so Jesus is called Ptah. And Asar, I'm sure you know Ptah of ancient Egypt. Actually, his full name was Kipta. So Jesus was called Kipta among the Kalenjiin, and the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians called one of their gods, one of the principal quote-unquote gods, Kipta. Kiptaios, the one that gave the name to Egypt. And is better known or more known to Egyptology as Ptah. And exactly, Jesus Christ, among the Kalenjiin, is called Kiptai or Ptah, Ptah. So I compared that. Then, of course, we had Ra. Interesting. I compare Ra, the ancient Egyptian quote-unquote sun god, with the Kalenjiin Ra. Ra in Kalenjiin is today, as occasioned by the sun. So the sun was Ra. Today, to say the word today is Ra inni, this sun. Today is this sun. And then I compare that. But of course, all this minding the fact that the Kalenjiin were really monotheistic, and all God could only be Asis. All these were just manifestations of Asis. The sun, because you see the sun in Kalenjiin is Asista, it's the same word as Asis. That is the sun. Asis is God, goddess. The sun is a sister, but I mean the same thing. Then we had Maat to compare, field day comparing Kalenjiin Maat with the ancient Egyptian Maat, finding out that it's the same thing. We had Ammon, and then most of the deities of ancient Egypt manifesting themselves as words in Kalenjiin. Just living words, just words, but no longer referring to God, but within the same context.
Do you think that you just mentioned that the terms may not be related to quote unquote specific deities? Do you think that back in the pharaonic times that it may not have really been deified in that way, that they were just really the common terms, but this is just the way that they talk? You know, how would you categorize or explain the nature of the ancient Egyptian mythological methodology of teaching certain principles and concepts in nature?
Probably they wanted to make it easier for the lay to understand. And if you wanted to teach people morality and other rules of nature, other rules of morality and behavior, probably they decided to bring them down under a god or goddess for you to perhaps respect, to generate more respect for them. But certainly they knew that these were just concepts embodied in quote-unquote gods. Like, well, the biggest one, of course, that you know is Maat. So they created this nice, beautiful goddess and said she represented the virtue, good virtue, good morals, ethics. But the Kalenjiin do not think of that as God. But the Maat system of the Kalenjiin forces you to behave as if you were taught those tenets of ancient Egyptian Maat. So for instance, if you have a relative you call each other Maat with, because you are perhaps you descend from a common ancestor, male ancestor, Maat, then you are obliged, you're obligated to do certain things. You are responsible. You have a responsibility towards that person, his or her welfare, as if this was your own brother, and you're obligated. You don't decide. You're obligated, or else you break a moral standard that all your relatives, via a certain way of reckoning, are yours, are your brothers. So anybody you call Maat is your brother, and you must treat them as your brother. And should one of them be in a sorry situation like losing something or going to die or something, you must take steps to make sure that doesn't befall them as you see. So you take responsibility. People have lost lives trying to save somebody they call Maat, rather than break a Maat rule. The soldiers, when you were a soldier, this was our community, was a martial community from the beginning. So they went out as soldiers fighting, and you were divided into 4 sections. Each of the 4, you call them Maat. Within each group of 4, every group had people who were related in a way, and they were calling each other Maat. And so if one of you falls in the battlefield, you're obligated to bring back his property if you could get, especially his shield, which had the marks of your Maat. You brought that shield back, or brought him dying if he was dying or almost dying, try to save him. You fight to get him back home. And some people lost lives trying to save their Maat man in the field. Somebody who had fallen, you still want to get some of the implements, some of his equipment, some of his tools of war, and you died trying to do that. You can see how strong this thing was. There's so many other Maat arrangements where, for that reason, for the reason that you are obligated to follow something, to obey certain rules and standards, you are calling each other Maat. And Maat is a very, very strong word.
Now, you mentioned, well, after reading the text, it is clear that there's many dimensions or layers to this concept of Maat. And one of them, you slightly hinted on it, but I want you to explain a little bit more. You talk about Maat being a kind of a relay torch for a patrilineal, for a patrilineage. And so could you explain a little bit more of that aspect of Maat, because that is something that isn't really discussed much in the Egyptological literature, if at all, in terms of connection through family lines and reincarnation?
Reincarnation, yes. Maat literally means the torch. Remember the old torch? People used to light an old torch, or they have something, yeah, it looks like one. An old torch you lit before the lamps, before the real torches came and other nice torches of these days. People used to light some material that looked like this, and you carried a torch in order to be able to see where you are going. Those are the days. So this Maat, it also means fire. This is the torch you must hand over to your successors, your sons, and your sons must hand over to their sons in turn, and daughters too. So that's Maat. You hand over your Maat torch. One thing, the worst thing that can happen to a man is for a Maat torch to die on him before you hand over. That means if you don't beget a child, a son, and hand over, you can beget daughters. They are of your Maat, but they cannot pass on Maat themselves. The next generation, they will pass on the Maat of their husbands, not yours. unless you did something. There's something they did to convert a girl into a boy so that she was able to pass the Maat forward. So Maat was very important. It had to be passed forward. She was converted into a boy, and any children she gave birth to were of your Maat, and therefore it was counted that she had passed on the torch. So that's the torch of Maat. And you don't die among the Kalenjiin. You don't die. When you die, you reincarnate. You reincarnate as you can reincarnate as your own grandson or as your own great grandson. So we believed in reincarnation. I am a reincarnation of my great grandfather. So we believe you don't die, you reincarnate. And if you are such a virtuous person, this is a marked lesson. If you are such a virtuous person during your life, when you died, you reincarnated so quickly, people, the next child born around there would answer to your name, and many others within your Maat lineage, the people within your lineage, would all, soon after your death, give birth to babies whom they would think was you. So you reincarnated. You reincarnated as somebody. So that is exactly what Maat is. You reincarnate. Reincarnation, I suspect, is a word related to us. Karna is name. Your name is brought back. Bring your Karna. Karna is name in Kalenjiin, ancient Egyptian. So I believe the word reincarnation, I suspect, must have something to do with our ancient people.
So I appreciate that. Well, you mentioned ISIS earlier, and briefly mentioned a connection with ISIS. Can you explain a little bit more about the connection you made in your book between ancient Egyptian Isis or Aset and Isis, and who is she? What are her characteristics? Things along those lines.
Isis, on the basis, simple basis of phonetics, Isis and Isis. Some people pronounce Isis, Asis, Asis. I suspected they were the same word. And then there's this goddess, Isis goddess, and her attributes and names, like the name Kemet, is the same name we have among Kalenjiin, some Kalenjiin groups, all of them called Isis Kemet, Tibet, the girl of the sky, of the heavens, Tibet, or the girl of the day, which is occasioned by the sun. So Isis Kemet, because Isis is still the sun. So our Isis, the Kalenjiin Isis, is thought of as a woman, not necessarily a woman, Mrs. or Miss so and so, but just what they call to enable you to talk and discuss. You give God a form, a human form, but really the ancients say God has no form, but they liked to think of God in feminine terms, so that even today, if someone were found to be so sick in the middle of the night or late at night, and they just hope he or she will be there tomorrow, alive, they say we leave everything in the laps of woman. That is God. So let's leave laps of woman. We leave it to God. So Isis, say that we leave it to goddess, Isis. And in Kalenjiin, since names go you can know by the name that this is a woman, or this is feminine, or this is masculine. So you know it's all feminine. Anything to do with God is feminine. And in Kalenjiin and other related languages like Maasai, Turkana, those are the other analytic languages more closely related to Kalenjiin. The grammar itself, if you're describing a lady, the grammar just betrays it. You can say, as if she comes, as if she comes, as if she goes, then you know you're talking about, like in Kimasai, God is Enkai. The En, Enkai, alone tells you that's a lady. So there was this, so I related in terms of gender that this was Assis, as Assis of Egypt in gender terms. They are all women. But then I realized when I studied more deeply later that all the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses coalesced under Assis, and they were the same. These are the supposed gods of Egypt. Excuse me about the lighting. These are the supposed gods and goddesses of Egypt, were all manifestations of one Assis. Or if it is Ra, maybe they are all manifestations of Ra or Ta or whatever. But according to me, Assis was greater than all of them, and they were all manifestations of Assis, because the ancient Egyptian, just as the Kalenjiin, still practice God, the creator ought to be thought of in terms of woman. My people once told me, the old people that I interviewed, they told me, we conceived God in feminine terms because women are associated with creativity, creating things, making things, but men are associated with destruction. So we don't want to give the maker that destructive attribute, but let's give them the creator attribute, which is monopolized by women on earth.
That reminds me of in Central Africa, for instance, among the Bakongo, one of the primary names for the divine is Nzambi. But we spoke earlier about Kalunga. And Kalunga, may seem like a separate deity, but it's really just a title and aspect of Nzambi. And so this is an aspect, because Kalunga can also mean to complete. And so Kalunga is a completely complete being, but then, Kalunga is also the ocean. And so it, now the Bantu languages doesn't distinguish gender like Kalenjiin does, or the ancient Egyptian, but there is many different titles that certain dialects will, I guess, propped up more or utilized more than another, region or dialect. And, from an outsider looking in, it may look like they have a whole bunch of deities, but amongst them, they understand them as just different aspects of the one. And so this seems to be, in many respects, a kind of a Pan-African characteristic, which, could be used to help explain, the ancient Egyptian phenomena. But moving forward, I want to hop to your second book in my possession. It is the Missouri Legend Explored, a linguistic inquiry into the Kalenjiin people's oral tradition of ancient Egyptian origin. And so you mentioned earlier about the Coptic, word, which kind of, spawned this journey for you. And this text here it seems like the first part is explaining the oral tradition and the journey. And then the second half is dedicated to a linguistic analysis. Can you tell us a little bit more about, this text and what you discovered as a result of, this research in regards to the language, a more systematized language study?
Okay, that's my second book. It compares the ancient Egyptian language or language stages with the Kalenjiin language, the living form of the same language, really speaking. So the way I introduce who the Kalenjiin are, and then what language they speak, and then analyze that language vis-a-vis the ancient Egyptian language in terms of, I compare aspects in this is linguistics, deep linguistics, so that there are standards that we follow if you are comparing two languages. So one standard is the grammar. The grammar is the word order the same. Like father has come home, in Kalenjiin would be probably has come home father. So it's verb first language, which is the characteristic shared with ancient Egyptian. Verb first language. It's called VSO or VOS, verb subject object language. So when you are giving a report, you first mention that what happened, and then mention who did it afterwards. So to say father has come home, as I told you, is, I mean, that's an example. You just say has come home father, or has come father home. That's a unique attribute of ancient Egyptian and Kalenjin and some North African languages you call Nilo-Saharan. Most other languages begin with the subject. So that's one thing to compare. Word order. Another one, you compare vocabulary. And the vocabulary you compare has to be the basic vocabulary. The basic vocabulary, these are words that are very hard to lose. You learn as a child, as a baby, and it's very hard to substitute with foreign words as you learn other languages. It's very hard to substitute those words, like let's say stomach, mouth, head, eyes. So these other languages cannot interfere with that. Those are so basic. So I compare the basic words like mouth, eye, nose, head, stomach, legs, run, mountain, sky, sun, big things that people don't easily change. Stomach, a hand, those are the words you compare. So there's a list of 100 words which have been set by linguists for that purpose. So you collect those words, take those 100 words, and get them in Kalenjin and in ancient Egyptian, compare them. So that's what I do in one part of my book, and a principal part of it, the grammar, that is the word order especially, and the vocabulary, using the basic words of language. Well, these are standards set by linguists, I mean the discipline of linguistics. And if you are doing that, you must follow those. Then other ways to compare language is perhaps by classes of words. You compare classes of words. Context, like what now? If you are in the sphere of God, discussing gods, or God, what are the words you use? If you are discussing the context of mountains, what are the words? The context of rain, what are the words? So in contextual terms, I forgot the real term that we use in linguistics. It will come as we talk.